where I was, when you've been at a dark place where you've taken life, you kind of like realize the importance of life and the importance of what it means to hold on to it and treasure it and appreciate it more, because you know how quickly you can lose it.
Hello, my name is Donald, and welcome to the #1 media company, WorldView. At WorldView, we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Today, we're going to chat with Witbooi. Welcome is a reformed gangster, actor, writer, inspirational speaker, and the director of the BrightSpark Foundation SA. Welcome, good morning. It's so great to have you on the show.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
So welcome. I'm looking forward to this conversation. First question, you have quite an unusual first name. What is the story behind that?
You know, that's kind of like interesting, because every time I go to the shop and I buy something, the lady at the counter always says to me, "You're welcome." And I always reply to her saying, "Yes, I am." And so she always looks at me like, this guy is weird. I think my name has become quite a very important part of my life. My grandmother misunderstood the conversation between my parents after my birth, when my father said to my mom, "You will be welcomed into the family." And when the doctor asked if they decided on a name already, my grandmother responded and said, "I overheard them saying welcome." So it just stuck with me. And so my grandfather tried fixing it by giving me a second name, which was Dennis. But I think that people loved the first name more. And so I've just continued using it. And it's been like an awesome icebreaker in many instances.
So, but Witbooi, correct me if I'm wrong, is an Afrikaans surname. So did you grow up in an Afrikaans family? It's more of a Namibian surname. My great grandfather is Hendrik Witbooi, who fought in the liberation for Namibia. So it's kind of like a big thing. So whenever I set foot in Namibia, it's always a good space for me to be in, because that's where my cultural heritage and everything is basically from. So yeah, that's where my surname is from. So welcome. A lot of people, our viewers, they might stay in security estates or much safer neighborhoods. So they have no idea what it is like growing up on the Cape Flats. So can you give us some perspective? What is it like growing up in the Cape Flats?
Yeah, so for me, I can start by flats. I grew up in a community called Bahalla Park, which is on the offskirts of the Cape Flats line. So you get Kalksteelfontein, you get Bonteheuwel, and you get Gugulethu, Tunyanga East, Khayelitsha. And these specific areas are quite rife in gangsterism, violence, drug abuse, and those types of scenarios. And I think it's predominantly because in the apartheid era, people were moved out of District 6, out of the, staying up in the mountains, moved down to stay closer to the coastline. So those areas were created as a way of just keeping us all together, and I think the frustration and everything built up, and people were not really happy with the being moved from where they were, that they built up so much resentment, anger, and that kind of like turned the community into very violent, gangs started forming in a way to protect their streets. And then in protecting the streets, the kind of Robin Hood syndrome took on a different, dynamic, where it became more of, once you've now become a Robin Hood in your community and you've now done more than you could have, what then do you become? Instead of gangs disbanding, they became more self-destructive. So I come from a community called Bahalla Park, which is predominantly, as I said, gang infested. So for me, it became more of growing up in that environment, not having a lot of choices. It's either I become a drug dealer, I become a drug pusher, or in a way, I also join the rest of what's happening in the community, or end up either in prison or end up dead. But the choices were quite minimal growing up in a Cape Flats community.
So what is the process like joining a gang? How does one join a gang?
I think for me, it started off in a sense that, you know, as men, you grow up in an environment where you want to become a man, where you want to be seen, where you want to be accepted. And I think for me, it was that part. I was 12 years old when I joined the gangs. I felt the need to belong. You know, I was at this school, Space Bona, which was a Model C school, and I used to wear a blazer to school, and my grandmother used to fetch me at the bus stop every single day, and I was teased a lot because of that type of overprotectiveness that my grandmother was exercising. But my grandmother had stayed in the area for a very long time, so she knew about the you know, the violence, the gangs, the type of pitfalls that I might fall into. So she tried her best to guide me, hence constantly going to fetch me at the bus stop. But when I used to go to the town, the community shop, I used to walk alone, and there were always boys on the corner, you know, speaking the language, teasing people, you know, often asking people for money. And if people didn't want to, they would, like, you know, use these kind of intimidating, you know, ways. And people would just give them because people feared them. And these boys used to tease me a lot. You know, they used to call me different names. They used to call me a sissy. They used to call me a morphy. They used to call me mama's boy, you know. And I didn't like it because I felt like I was part of the community. And I felt that I've earned my right to be accepted as part of the community. So being called those names didn't sit well with me. But at the same time, which is quite funny, was the fact that I internally admired them. You know, I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to, you know, necessarily stand on the street corners with them, but I admired them. And I think for me, that is what drew me to get to know them more. And that is what also got me into the gangs in the first place.
So now a member of a gang, what did you do? Like, I believe you broke into houses. What were some of the acts that you committed as a gang member?
You know, it's funny enough because growing up in a very conservative family, with my father constantly working and always being busy, my mom trying her best, my grandmother being the kind of like real caregiver and kind of like support to me, having to change my upbringing to a point to try and fit in with my new friends was kind of like the real, you know, that was the real make it or break it of me at that specific moment. I mean, I wanted these guys to accept me. So I was prepared to do anything to be accepted by them. And so walking with them, standing with them, you know, and they used to break in a lot. So they started teaching me breaking into houses, stealing, you know, they started teaching me how to rob people, you know, how to use a knife. So I kind of like, in a way, didn't really like who I was becoming. But at the same time, I also knew that if I had not done and become part of them, I would not really be, you know, identified as part of the community. I mean, number one, the girls loved these guys. You know, the community looked up to them. You know, they were the talk of the town. And me going to school wearing my blazer wasn't really fun. I do believe that as I was initiated into the gang, I was once told that gang members saw education as a tool of the white man to keep us captive, to enslave us, to make them their tool. So therefore, we need to liberate ourselves from that. And the way of doing that was to take from people that had, to show them that we were in control, which obviously at this specific moment, growing up and becoming more
wiser, because the older you become, the more wise you become. You kind of like understand it was just a lie to keep you there. But those were the sacrifices that I made as a young boy. I mean, at 12 years old, what did I know? I was naive, I was stupid, I was foolish, I was easily influenced. And that is how I, progressed and lived my life.
And as you climbed the ranks, all of a sudden you were told that you now had to kill someone. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, for me, it was like, when you get into a kind of a place in your life where you think that, you're going to be just chilling here, you're just going to be sitting here and, reaping the benefits of being part of a gang, not realizing that it becomes more intense. So from housebreaking, now it becomes robbery. And sometimes when a person does not want to give over what you're taking from them, you are sometimes forced to stab them, and to a point where you stab them fatally. So for me, at this point where I've been in the gangs since as I started at 12, I was now 14, and getting to the age of them accepting me for who I was. They finally gave me this, they called me and said, welcome, you've been with us for quite a while now. We think it's time for you to be fully initiated into the gang. And for me, I was like, but I've always walked with you. I've always done things with you. I've always thought that I was part of it already. And they said, no, there are levels to being part of this gang. Where you were was just like the introduction level. In order for us to know that you're with us, we need to test your loyalty. We need to test your compliance with the rules and who we are as a gang. And that meant solidifying the relationship. And I asked, what does it mean? So they said, so tonight we're having a meeting. And in this meeting, we are going to give you a rite of passage. That is where you're going to become a man. So at the age of 15, 16, I was like really excited, because I was like, okay, tonight I'm going to become a man. I did not know what it meant. I did not have an idea of what they meant, but all I knew was like I was finally getting noticed. I was finally getting recognized. So that sense of wanting to belong was coming to fulfillment. And that was the only thing that was important to me. I wasn't listening to my grandmother. I wasn't listening to my parents. I wasn't listening to my teachers. I was a straight A student. I never had problems at school. I was like completely focused. And for the first time, I felt like I didn't want to be at school anymore. I wanted to be with these guys. I wanted to belong here because I felt a sense of purpose. And as I stepped into that circle that evening, this man stepped up to me and he handed me a white cloth and he said I should open it. And as I opened the white cloth, it was I remember it was a snub nose 38 special, and it had 8 bullets. And he said, this is you becoming a man. This is your tool that you are going to be given, and that we are giving you, trusting you to use it wisely. And when instructed to use it, for the cause of the gang. And for me, it was like, wow, these guys were trusting me, because for the first time, I now finally had my own gun, and I've always seen it in movies. I've always admired it. And I've always like thought, what it would be like to just literally have one. And now I was being given this, and I could tell you the how powerful I felt the moment I touched it was remarkable. It was like in my hand, I had the power to take life. And it was really that weird kind of feeling. And they said, okay, now that you've been given this is your license. This is what makes you belong to us. You are going to step out. And in order to solidify and strengthen the relationship and your loyalty to us, you're going to have to take a life, and it was like, for me, it was like, okay, I don't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what the complications or consequences of that would be, but I felt quite safe. I felt that I could trust them. And that is where my journey actually started.
And what happened on the day? They chose a person randomly that you had to kill, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and for me it was kind of like weird because, you know, it's like you can't choose an individual yourself. So we would get into a car and we would drive around, and you know, they would sometimes make jokes and say, I think this guy looks like the perfect candidate, you know, and then they would say, no, we're joking, maybe that one, you know. It was that kind of like, now we are deciding who needs to lose their life today, you know. And they were laughing about it, and it was kind of like weird because they were expecting me to take a person's life, and they were just gonna randomly select someone, you know. I remember us stopping at this train station, and this lady was walking out of the train station, and she was going towards her car, and the car stopped, and these men says, that's your target, you know. And I said, okay. And then I took my gun. They showed me how to load the bullets. I stepped out of the car. I approached this lady and I pointed the gun at her. And her first reaction was, please don't shoot me. Take what you want. You know, she proceeded to hand me over a bag. She wanted to give me her car keys, you know, and I could see that she was truly afraid. And I could understand and feel that I had the power right now to decide, you know, whether I wanted to end her life. And the guys were shouting and saying like, just do it, brah. We don't have time, do it, you know. And as she was holding her stomach, she said to me, please don't shoot, I am pregnant. It was at that moment that I realized that if I were to shoot this woman, I wouldn't just kill her, but I would also kill an unborn child. And my mind literally went into overdrive. I had to quickly think on my feet and decide that, is this the type of man that I want to become? The type of man that would ultimately take 2 lives as opposed to the 1 life that I was requested to take, or that I was, coerced into taking. And at that moment, I decided, you know what, instead of taking a life, I said, get into your car and let's drive. I felt that I could negotiate with these men and say, listen, instead of taking her, maybe we should just take the car. You know, let's just do that kind of fair exchange. And I couldn't drive, so I asked her to drive her own car, and I said, just follow the guys in front. And I realized as we were driving and she was talking to me, telling me that she's got, you know, she's got a baby on the way, you know, she's got a family, and she started talking into my head about like, I just want to be a mom. I kind of like understood the relationship I had with my mother, how tough and difficult it was growing up with my mom, who wanted me to be tough, who wanted me to be a good man. And I kind of like realized that she's really, you know, as this woman is speaking to me, she's really reminding me of those values that I grew up with as a child myself. And I realized that if we were to leave this area and go to where these men were, they were definitely going to kill her. And so we stopped at the robots, and I said, well, just jump out of the car and run as fast as you can. And that is at that moment when she stopped, and at the robots, she jumped out. I attempted to pretend as if I was chasing her. And the one guy came out and asked me, how stupid can you be? Why didn't you just kill her? She saw your face and all of that stuff. And I realized that, you know what, these men are quite pissed, and maybe I might lose my life at the end of the day. But in my head, I kind of like thought that what I had done was more important. So as we were arguing, we were surrounded by the community police, and it was just chaos, and we were all arrested on that night. And as we were in this police vehicle, these men started to negotiate and say, welcome, because this was your mess. You did not do what you were supposed to do. You need to stand for this case. You need to tell the police that you don't know us, that we have nothing to do with this. And in exchange, we will take care of you. We will take care of your family. We'll come and visit you in prison. But because you are underage, you might not even get a harsh sentence. They might just give you a warning, 6 months, and then you'll be out. And I believe them. You know, I truly did.
Have you ever met the woman that you were supposed to kill again? Have you ever seen her again?
Which was quite interesting, you know, when I went back to court, and I had told the judge that I had not known these men. She was there to testify, So she had to tell the judge what had actually happened. I was too ashamed to look her in the face because I realized that I had actually, did what I did, and there was a whole lot of charges. There was kidnapping, there was, attempted murder, there was extortion. All of these things were brought into the court. And when I looked at her at that moment, you could see that visibly she was pregnant because her stomach was much bigger, and her husband was sitting by her, and I could see that he was furious, he was angry, and I felt the shame, this guilt coming over me. And as much as I really wanted to talk to her, I couldn't, because in the courtroom sat members of the gang as well. So I had to put up this facade of I'm still in control of the situation, knowing very well that I wasn't. Just to answer your question, I didn't have the chance to talk to her at that moment. But later on, as the story progresses, you'll see how it ends. So as I told the judge that I didn't know these men and that I took this case upon myself, thinking that I was going to get like 2761 IB, which was a correctional supervision, for 6 months because of my age, I was actually given 23 years. I remember I was 17 years old when I was sentenced. And I remember that everything, like my hearing, my sense, I couldn't even stand at the shock of being given so many years. People started making jokes and saying, by the time you come out of prison, welcome cars would be flying. They were telling me in 2023, they were making jokes and all of that. And my grandmother was very disappointed. My parents did not come to the court, not once, to any of my hearings. So as I went into the prison, my clothes were taken and I was given this green uniform and black shoes and a blanket and a pair of pajamas, pushed into a cell. I realized that my life was getting real. I realized that I was in a place right now that I never could have prepared myself for.
And that's when you joined the numbers gang, where you said the right word, or you just found the right word that you had to say.
Yeah, I remember this guy coming up to me. I was standing there, rightfully in a correctional services setting. A correctional officer needs to appoint a bed, so take you to your bed and say, this is where you're going to sleep, show you your cupboard, put your stuff in there. But I was sent to Pollsmoor prison, which was the one of the 5 most deadliest prisons in the world. And I was just pushed into the cell, and it was this other guy next to me that was also with me. And as we were standing there, these 2 men approached us. And this one guy asked me, who are you in prison? And I said, I'm welcome. And this guy just slapped me. I was like, okay. And then he asked me again, who are you in prison? And I said, welcome. And he slapped me again. And in my head, I clearly thought to myself that I'm not welcome here. So the guy next to me, when they asked him, who are you in prison? He responded by saying, Frans van Jonalanga. And nothing happened to him. So I thought, if he could say that, maybe I should say the same. And I then said, Frans van Jonalanga, and nothing happened. So that's where these men came and they said, you've made the right decision, you made the right choice. And they then took me to the back of the room and started telling me about what prison is about, how I'm going to have to live. And the fact that I have now chosen to become part of the numbers gang. I didn't even know that I had chosen to become part of the number gang. I did not know that what I actually said was that I was willing to become a member of the 28s, which was one of the 3 most powerful number gangs within the prison system.
And for our viewers, I mean, you've mentioned that Pollsmoor is one of the 5 most deadliest prisons in the world. What is daily life like in Pollsmoor?
Being there and being in the thick of things, like, in a room that's supposed to accommodate, 20 to 30 men, we were 120, to 150 in that small space. Beds were literally 3 stacked on top of each other. There was little mattresses on the floor where men literally slept like sardines, you know, waking up early in the morning for attention, having to, you know, having breakfast at 7 in the morning, and 1 hour exercise, but being locked up for 23 hours, you know, witnessing the frustration that men have. Because, I mean, imagine people confined in that space for such a long time. You know, just a man rubbing up against you was a fight. Just making a stupid joke and it being misunderstood was a stabbing. You know, so that was the kind of thing where you literally saw men raped, men stabbed, men killed. When the numbers used to fight with each other, it was knives coming out, and you were in that process where you couldn't run anywhere, you couldn't hide, you couldn't run out of the room, because you were literally in that space having to witness that. It's either you witness it, you fall victim to what's happening, or you join and also fight, because it's all about survival. And for me, that is what I chose. I chose to say, I'm not going to live for the next 23 years of my life, you know, ducking and diving, you know, attempts of men trying to rape me, attempts of men trying to stab me, attempts of men trying to use me. You know, I'm definitely have to choose. And that is where a man said to me, if you want to really have influence in prison, you need to stab a correctional officer and gain your stars. And once you gain a star, you gain respect, recognition, and loyalty.
And just quickly, this numbers gang, it's the only gang in Pollsmoor.
Yeah, there's no other you know, number. So you get the 26s, 27s, and 28s. And funny enough, contrary to popular belief, people always say, yeah, but the number gang this, the number gang that. But if you think about it, when I was in the number, I actually realized something very important in the sense of saying that outside in South Africa, there's so many street gangs. There's the Yakis, there's the Dixies, there's the Vatos, there's the Baratos, there's various gangs. There's the Mongrels, there's the Americans, there's the Achas, there's the HLs, I can name them. Imagine a place where they all meet. And once they get to that place, they need to park their sense of revenge. They need to park their sense of animosity and join a number. And for the amount of years that they're going to be in that prison, literally have to be a brother to the enemy. You know, it was like a weird kind of sense, but it was the only way that peace and tranquility could actually resonate in the prison environment. I mean, if you look at prisons like in the States, where the Crips and the Bloods are fighting in the penitentiary prisons, like if a Crip comes into that prison in the States and he's put into, you know, the other side of the prison, they would literally kill him because he's an opposing gang member. But in the South African prison, it doesn't work like that. You literally have to leave your gang at the prison door and enter and choose a number, and throughout the years of being there, live in tranquility and peace. And once you leave prison, you can then continue fighting your war if you want to. But for me, I felt like that was the only positive spin of the number within the prison environment. Other than that, it would have been chaotic, it would have been chaos if the number did not exist.
Okay, so now you were told that you have to kill a policeman or police guard to gain some rank. So what's the story behind that?
Yeah, so what would happen is the number was more of like a, you know, you join the number because it allows you and it protects you. So it's kind of like a safety. So it kind of like took me back to where I was outside, you know, when I was still growing up as a boy, joining the gangs at the age of 12. So it took me back there saying, I've done this outside, now I have to do it again. You know, it's like when you go to, in grade 7, you are the head boy, you are the it. But then you go to high school and then you have to start all over again, you know. So for me, it was that kind of thing. It's like now I've gone from outside being in the street gang
Now I'm in prison, I have to join the prison gang, and the rules are very different, but yet the modus operandi is the same, is that you need to take a life in order to belong. You need to take a life in order to be respected. You need to take a life in order to affirm your loyalty. So it was the same thing all over again. And when they told me about the process, they said, we're going to give you a knife. We're going to show you the correctional officer that you need to stab. It was the same thing all over for me, because I couldn't choose a correctional officer. They would choose a correctional officer for me. They would say, that's the one that we want you to target. And the general of the number had his own intentions as to why he chose that member. You know, it was always him wanting to do his own thing, or he had his own intention. I could not tell him what to do because he was in charge of the number. So when they gave me that knife and they said, that is the member that we want you to stab, they said, but when you go and stab, you're going to go with two men. These men were called draad and glas. In English, a wire and a glass. So in prison term, a wire represents somebody that hears everything, and a glass represents somebody that sees everything. So these men had two choices, or these men had two very important responsibilities. The first one was, number one, to make sure that I actually stabbed the correctional officer. And if I failed to do so, they also had knives, so they must stab me. So it was that kind of thing of saying, okay, so if I get to the correctional officer and I get cold feet, I would be the one being stabbed. And the other reason why they were there was that if I had stabbed the correctional officer, I have to throw my knife to the back. They would pick it up, conceal it, and walk away. Because if there's no knife found on me, I can't get an added sentence. You know, so that was the kind of, you know, where they protect you, but at the same time, do you harm. So it was a very difficult position. So for me, it was like I had to make a choice. Do I take the life of this correctional officer, or do I allow them to take my life? And that was the tough decision that I had to make again. So as I stepped up to this correctional officer, because he knew me, he was working in the unit, he didn't suspect that I would do anything. He didn't suspect that I would harm him. And as I stabbed him in the neck, and I watched him fall, bleeding. And a part of me, that conservative, good boy, wanted to help. But I also knew that going down to help him would also be my demise. And that is where the rest of the correctional officers came, and they took me down and beat me to a pulp and put me in solitary confinement. And I was there for like 4 weeks, you know, dark cell, no lights, you know, being woken up with a hose pipe every single morning, you know, food being thrown at you, you know, and the powerlessness, the loneliness, you know, being in that cell and, you know, becoming, you know, a different type of person, because right now you've taken your first life. And I remember that day when they released me back into population, I had men standing straight in a line, the prisoners standing straight in a line, all raising their fingers in the 28 salute and respecting me and giving me that salute to say, now steps a man out of that dark cage. Now steps out a man that has now become almost like born again, you know, that kind of respect amongst these men. And when I saw that, my world changed completely. And I went on to do it more often. And I ended up, you know, at the age of 21, I had 2 stars on my shoulders on both sides, which meant 4, you know, 2. And then at the age of 24, I had 3 stars on both my shoulders. And at the age of 25, I became the youngest general of the 28s within the entire history of Pollsmoor prison. And that then started my life of where I was now in charge of 2,500 men.
And you earned 500,000 Rand a month.
And yeah, and coming with the responsibility of being a general, obviously all the types of businesses that run in prison, I was in charge of them, you know, solicitation, extortion, drugs, all kinds of things that was happening. It was my responsibility to make sure that everybody was towing the line,
and that the money was coming in. You know, obviously in prison, we didn't work with hard currency, but money was being smuggled in, drugs were being smuggled in, the exchanging was happening. Just to give viewers an understanding of how it works is that the 26ers, within a corporate setup, they would be the distributors. They would be the ones that would sell. You know, if you needed a saw to saw your way through a burglar bar in prison, they would obtain it for you, and then you have to pay them. But whatever you give them, 75% of that comes to the 28s because they are in control. So if they sold you marijuana, 75% of that comes to the 28. If they sold you cocaine, 75% of that comes to the. So that's how the money was being made. Obviously, the 26ers weren't always happy with the terms and conditions. That is why the 27 was there to maintain that. So in a corporate setup, the 27 would be HR, you know, making sure that everybody towed the line, you know, keeping to the terms and conditions, keeping to the, you know, the rules, the regulations that needs to be followed. And if they do not follow those rules and regulations, there would be punishment. So, and the 27 would then be forced to appropriate that punishment. And the 28 obviously would be the ones that secured certain places within the prison. Like the 28s were predominantly found in the kitchen. And the reason why they were found in the kitchen, because the kitchen was the entry point for things outside. You know, the kitchen, you know, the butter, the milk, everything needed to come from inside. So it was that kind of regulation. The 26ers were predominantly in the corridors and in the offices because they need to be the runners in the corridors selling the stuff, you know, so that was the kind of dynamic. And the prison, that was the lay of the land. That's how it works.
And then you decided to leave the gang. What happened there?
You know, I was sitting in the courtyard and these gang members were sitting there. And like I said, being a general at young age, I was very naive. As I said, I didn't know how to wield that kind of leadership, you know, so I made a lot of stupid mistakes and all of that. But at the same time, I also learned a lot. So as I was sitting outside and I was surrounded by my men, these two men were sitting in front of me and they were having a conversation. And the one man was saying to the other one, yo, brah, just the other day, yo, I was breaking into this house and I saw this woman, she was alone, and there was nobody there, and she had this, you know, this nightie on. I had my way with her, I raped her and stuff, and they were laughing about it, you know, and the other one talked about how they used to rob and stab and kill, and they were like, there was no remorse in what they were saying, you know, and suddenly I thought that, imagine if I were to be a father one day, what kind of father am I going to be? And imagine if people asked my daughter, like, what does your father do? Or who is your father? And my daughter responded by saying, you know, my father is a gangster. You know, what legacy would I leave behind for her? And how would I be able to protect her against men like this, that found joy in hurting others, that found pleasure in killing? And for me, that became my turning point. And I realized that this is not the type of life I wanted for myself. 7 years, I've been, you know, in a position of authority and power. And I've made so much money in prison, but I didn't feel content. I did not feel happy. I did not feel safe. I mean, imagine every single night sleeping, but my one eye was always open because I was always worried about what if they kill me, what if they come for me, and, you know, so for me, it was that constant, like, imagine having all of that power, but yet at the same time, you know, leadership with fear, they don't necessarily go together. And I was walking down the corridor on my way from another unit, and I met this scrawny little man who was doing prison ministry, and he looked at me and he said, welcome, I heard so much about you. I just want to give you a message. And I said, what do you want to say? He said to me, imagine you using this power, this leadership for a totally different reason. You know, imagine how you could bring people together in a different way than in a violent manner. I didn't understand what it meant at that moment. But for me, that week suddenly became a week of real introspection, questioning whether I still wanted to be this person. And I decided not to. I decided that I'm done. I'm stepping out. I'm retiring. And that's when all hell broke loose.
But why do you think it is that these individuals lost their humanity and you did not? After all, you came through the same system. So why did you decide this is bad, this is terrible, but they started to enjoy it? What do you think? How did this happen?
I think for me, I've always had the notion of believing that no one is born bad. No child comes out of a mother's womb holding a knife or a gun. We are all born with a part of us that reminds us that we are internally, we are good people. But it's just that our circumstances and the choices that we sometimes make often lead us to make a certain decision that ends up either in the, as I always say, either you end up in the boardroom or you end up in prison, or you end up in a coffin. You have that kind of decision that you need to make. So for me, I think that I had, when I'm thinking about it, and remember the promise these men made, saying to me that if I go to prison, they'll come to me, they'll visit me, they'll support me. None of them came, by the way. None of them ever visited me, by the way. None of them even contributed to me while I was in prison. None of them even supported my family outside, by the way. So it was just lies. The only person that came to me while I was in prison was my grandmother. The very person that I did not want to listen to. When she was telling me to stop my nonsense, I was telling her, you don't tell me, I know what I'm doing. She was the only person that was coming to me. So her visiting me, I remember I was moved to so many prisons, Hellerstroom, Brandvlei, Drakensberg. I was never kept in one prison. And her coming to visit me at all of those prisons kind of reminded me of the fact that she really saw the good in me. I remember when she came there and I had stabbed another correctional officer and she couldn't see me. She waited until they brought me out. She refused to leave, and she used to say to me that I'm praying for you, I'm thinking about you, I'm rooting for you. You're gonna come out of this place. You're not gonna die in here. So I think it's that I had this one person in my corner that believed in me. And I think that every child that loses their way in life needs that kind of support, needs that one person that can really believe in them and say that I see you, I feel you, and I believe that no matter what mistakes you've made, I'm standing here in support of you. No judgment, no ridicule. You can make it. And for me, that is what kept my humanity intact. If I didn't have my grandmother, I don't think that I would have survived prison.
That's so fascinating. But yeah, so welcome. So you decided to leave the gang. How did you manage to do that?
So it's protocol that when a general wants to step down, that other generals from other prisons needs to come and have a sitting. It's called an open circle. And what happens is that in the circle, the general that wants to retire needs to enter the circle naked, which is quite funny because generals are very paranoid because it was 4 generals from 4 other prisons. So their first point of paranoia is welcome is inviting us to Pollsmoor, and he's going to kill all 4 of us, and he's going to run our prisons, So in order for that not to happen, he needs to step into the circle completely naked, meaning that he's not, hiding a knife, and an entire prison room needs to be cleared so that these 4 generals can have a room to themselves. So you need to move 150 prisoners into other rooms because these generals cannot sleep in a room filled with other offenders because they are highly protected individuals. And calling them to the prison also requires a lot of planning, preparation, and permissions, that goes as high up as the Minister of Correctional Services, because he needs to approve their transport to the prison. So having them there is like a great honor, because now you have an opportunity to actually lay your story in front of them and tell them why you want to leave. So the protocol is 2 of the generals serve as judges. So they stand in front of you. And then the other 2 stand behind you, and they are the ones that they are the executioners. So once again, they both have knives. So as you're standing in the middle, the 2 judges looking in front of you, and the other 2 judges, the other generals, which are the executioners, behind you. So if the decision is not favorable, the 2 judges, the 2 generals behind must stab you where your kidneys are, twist the knives, pull it out, and you'll bleed out for 5 minutes. And then you die because they did not agree to let you go. But the most fascinating thing about that death is that for 8 days, if you're 28, for 8 days, the prison is on lockdown. They sing songs about you. They think about all the things that you've done. They reminisce about you for 8 days. Just like imagine, for 8 days, that's what happens. Everybody's like, wow, Welcome was the best general. Welcome was this, Welcome was that. The people are burning toilet paper. People are burning this. People are burning sheets. It's just a feast. And then after the 8 days, your colonel steps into the position to become the next general. And after that, you are forgotten. And for me, it was like, imagine like your legacy was 8 days long. Who wants to live a life like that? I mean, Nelson Mandela's legacy has been longer than 8 days. And for me, it was like, I don't want to have a legacy of 8 days. As I was standing there and said to these guys, gentlemen, I'm choosing not to continue this journey. I'm choosing me. I'm choosing to become a father. I'm choosing to make different life decisions. I need you men to let me go. And these men said, but Welcome, you did so much. You've raised a lot of money. There's order. You've done such a lot of awesome work. Why do you want to just leave all of this behind? And just for a backstory in the life of a general that steps out of prison, there are benefits. So if you're a general that leaves prison, you are given a package. So the package, let's say, like with me, 500,000 rand a month, the money that I make in prison is given to a board of trustees. It's called the council. So these men take the money and they use it for whatever reasons. But from that money, you get a percentage that's put away for you. So if you have made that for years, you get your cut. You get a car and you get a house. So that's your package. If you get less than 500,000, then it's probably a Mazda. If you get like 500,000, it's Mercedes-Benz or BMW. If you make less than 100,000, then it's probably like what, a Chico? I don't know. But that's the kind of, so there's a lot of incentives and benefits to being a general. Hence, many of these guys don't want to leave the number because they know that at the end of the day, they'll get something. But it's still a life sentence because you are never really done. You are never really out, and for me, I wanted out completely. I didn't want the benefits. I didn't want the incentives. I went into that circle with a clear mind and saying to myself that I'm choosing. I don't want the benefits. I don't want a percentage. I want nothing to do with the number. I have my ranks. I'll just be in the background. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to comment. I don't want to order. I don't want to command. I just want to do my time, go home, start a family, and live my life according to my standards. And the men said it's going to be a difficult decision to do Welcome. So they asked me to step out of the circle as they were discussing what they should do. At that moment, when they were discussing, one of the generals called me and said, Welcome, do you remember 6 years ago, I couldn't read, I couldn't write. You taught me to read and write. I'd already forgotten that I taught this guy to read and write. I mean, 6 years ago, I was probably at the Alderstrom or a different prison, you know, and this guy told me that you taught me to read and write. One of the other generals, which was quite interesting, said to me that he had an argument with his girlfriend in the visiting area. And I asked my grandmother to sit with him, and I spoke to his girlfriend. I said to his girlfriend, listen, your bra, it's tough in here. Give your man a break. And he said, because of the conversation you had with my girlfriend, we are still together today because of you. So what I'm trying to say, Donovan, is that no matter how ruthless I was in my leadership as a general, that did not save me from death that day. That did not save me from their knives. What saved me was that little act of kindness. Just that one act of kindness saved my life. I took time to teach this guy to read and write. And that is why I always say to people, no matter where you sit in life, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a director of a company, whether you are a leader somewhere, it is not your ruthlessness and your approach and how strict you are and how big you are that allows people the opportunity to respect you for who you are. It is actually your kindness towards people that builds the credibility of who you really need to become. And for me, that was my saving grace. The fact that I taught this guy to read and write, that saved my life. And that is why I'm sitting here and I can do the work that I do and continue my work.
Yeah, that's such a good point, the message about kindness. But welcome, what is the work that you currently do? How are you trying to stop this from happening to younger kids?
Yeah, so I founded a foundation called BrightSpark South Africa, which is specifically aimed at helping boys and girls, get out of the gangs. Because we do understand that most of our kids want to be part of gangs because they see the bling. I always say to people that when I walk around with my rings and with my chains, they're like, hey, is he still part of the gang? And I say, no, it is an attraction. It is a drawing card. When kids see me with this bling, they draw closer to me, and that's an opportunity for me to, have a conversation with them. It's an opportunity for me to really get them talking about, why do you think that having a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW or rings or bling is important as opposed to being a good human being, living a life without helping, supporting, and building a community in the right way, instead of breaking it down, thinking that you are actually helping. But when you sell drugs, when you kill, when you fight with other gang members, you're only destroying the foundation and your moral value as a human being. So that's the kind of work that I do, is like, we help young people who are caught in gangs to get out of the gangs. We work with boys and girls, and we inspire them to think beyond their circumstances, to say to themselves that I'm not going to be a product of my circumstances. I'm going to be bigger than my circumstances. I'm going to step out into the world and express my talent. We have an APC Academy that stands for Acting, Photography, and Choreography, where we help young people identify with their artistic selves. Where we have photography, and photography we use in a sense of saying, instead of plucking that flower, we say to them, take a picture of that flower, because that flower continues to bloom. It continues to be an important part of society, instead of coming and just plucking things out. It's a moral fiber of realizing that we can take pictures of beautiful things. We don't have to capture them, cage them, and look at them every single morning when we wake up. We can allow the bird to be free. We don't have to catch the bird and put it in a cage. You love a bird, take a picture, you have it. It's that kind of thing that we teach our young people, and it helps them to understand the value of life. And I think for me, where I was, when you've been at a dark place where you've taken life, you kind of like realize the importance of life and the importance of what it means to hold on to it and treasure it and appreciate it more, because you know how quickly you can lose it. So we teach our kids the value of life but also serving others as opposed to just serving yourself. So that's what the foundation does. We have boy circles, we have girl circles. We work with kids that are predominantly coming from only mother-headed households or only father-headed households. But we work with kids that are really struggling to make sense of their circumstances and supporting them to become better citizens and not choosing to become part of gangs or joining gangs or choosing crime. So that's the work we do.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and I wish you all the best. But welcome, I see our time is running out. Thank you so much for this interview. This has been an amazing perspective. I want to give you one last opportunity to add, plug, or say anything that you want to.
Yeah, so I mean, as I always say, I want to specifically talk to parents out there, especially fathers. You know, we're going through a lot with our boys. You know, there's a lot that our kids are going through. Fathers, please be more present and available in your child's life. Parents, pay close attention to the friends that your children have, and don't just, you know, take it for granted. Appreciate them, support them, journey with them, and be involved in their lives. That's what I can say to parents. And be kind to one another.
Absolutely, and who can disagree with that? Well, thank you, welcome. Thank you so much to our viewers. If you've made it this far, you'll most certainly enjoy this content. Please consider liking this video, sharing it as widely as possible, and subscribing to our channel. My name is Donald, and you've been watching WorldView.